Welcome, everybody. In case anybody's wondering, usually the first question I get about this is, are we going to record this webinar? And we are. So everybody that's in this webinar will actually get a link to the recording of this webinar. So you do not have to take copious notes. You can just take the notes you want to take. So welcome, everybody. All right. Should we dive in and get started?
Let's go ahead and get started.
Go for it, Tom.
All right. Well, welcome to everyone. I am Tom Evans, consultant and trainer with Productside, and I live in Austin, Texas, as we said earlier, and looking forward to leading you through this webinar today.
Great. And I am assisting Tom today. I'm Kenny Kranseler. I'm also a principal consultant and trainer at Productside. As I mentioned, I reside up near Seattle, but I'm visiting a little bit from Palm Springs. That's where I'm dialing in from today. All right. Well, so welcome, everybody. Let me start by welcoming you and sort of as a way of introduction, give you a little introduction to Productside, who we are, basically the team behind today's webinar, right? And at Productside, we sort of know how hard it can be to really create, deliver, and execute on products that people not only use, but truly love, right? And a whole host of activities around that, around aligning stakeholders, figuring out and predicting customer needs, managing endless backlogs. We've really seen it all, right? In terms of your product journey. And that's sort of why we're here. We really want to become your outcome-driven product partner. And we don't just really want to provide solutions, but we tailor them to meet your specific unique challenges, right? And that can mean anything across the journey of transformations, right? From strategy to execution to development to delivery to iteration, innovation, evolution, and yes, even AI. We're sort of with you every step of the way. And we tailor our solutions to the context that you all live in, right? We know that your challenges are unique to your specific business. And that's why our solutions aren't general solutions about how product management should be done, but specific to the specific problems that you run into. And we leverage a whole bunch of experts, people like Tom and myself, that really sort of become, in the process of transformation, an extension of your team. And all of us are well experienced and obsessed with your success, right? We're really thrilled to sort of have you all here today. Let's dive in and sort of help your product team thrive and make things happen. As I mentioned, before we dive in, let's talk a little bit about how we're really going to sort of keep this session interactive as much as we can if we're not in the same room. And as I mentioned, the first question that people are going to ask is, can I watch the recording later? The answer is a definite yes on that one. We'll send you a link to the recording, right? And during the session, we do want to hear from you, right? There's a Q&A feature inside of Zoom. Please use that to ask questions. I'll monitor it throughout the talk that Tom's going to provide. If one is specifically relevant to a topic that Tom's working on, I have no fear to go interrupt him if I need to be. So you don't feel like you have to wait until the end to speak up. If you've got a question, we'll handle it live as we go along. We really sort of love engaging with folks in real time. There's also a chat feature where you can connect with fellow product managers that are viewing this webinar, right? Ask your colleagues questions, share your own experience, just cheer each other on. It's really sort of a space for you to sort of learn from each other as much as you do from us. So keep the energy up, don't hold back. Really, this is your chance to sort of get the most out of today's session. And don't forget, as part of this initiative, before we dig into today, please connect with us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn page really is more than just a place to follow Productside. It's really a community, right? You can join us. You'll get access to things like best practices for inspiring leadership in your own team's growth. We'll have conversations about the things like the role of product management and how to make it more impactful, and really opportunities for you to network with other professionals in the product management field who share your challenges, share your goals, right? So you can either scan the QR code that's on your screen right now to join us instantly, or if you want, visit the link that we've got on this slide. We really want to hear your thoughts, swap ideas, keep that conversation going. after today's session, right? Let's continue to work together to build stronger product management community. All right. And we also have on the next slide our newsletter. So please, similarly, you can scan this QR code or again get the link that's on this page to join our newsletter, the Product Side Pulse, right? Hopefully we can inject some product caffeine into your inbox every day so where you can get an entire week of product noise into a 5-minute read. All right. We surface only those sort of key market moves, the funding rounds, data points that really matter to product managers. And it's not just clickbait. We're going to provide ready to deploy insight. Plus, you'll get first dibs on things like cheat sheets, templates, webinars. Sometimes we have free cohort seats. Hopefully, keep you one sprint ahead of the crowd, right? Without further ado, let's dive into our topic today around good and bad strategy. So, Tom, you want to dive us in there?
Absolutely. So again, welcome everybody to today's webinar. And just to give you a heads up, we're going to talk about this later, but this is just the first part in a series around strategic planning. Because we know as we work with our clients that this time of year, depending upon what your calendar looks like, is typically the time period for strategic planning. So starting here in the maybe possibly in the June, but definitely the July, August, September into October timeframe. And so we want to make sure that we provide some value and new insights to you as you start to go into your strategic planning cycle. And so as we go through this, we're going to really talk about what is strategy and what it isn't, because I find that we often get confused, or at least we think we know what a strategy is, but yet in so many cases, we're not actually talking strategy and we feel like we are talking strategy. We're going to then roll that into really narrowing that down and talking about what a good product strategy looks like. Show you some examples of at least the starting point and some of the key decisions to a good product strategy. And then we're going to share with you some tools that to connect back into what we're talking about that you will be able to use to help you as you're working through your product strategy. So first of all, we have a poll here. And so this is a multiple select, and the poll is asking you, which of these elements do you include in your product strategy? And so select all of those that apply to your situation. We're starting to get
Feel
some
free to
votes
just
coming
click
in
on
here.
as many as one or as many as fit into your strategy.
All right.
Good job.
We're getting a pretty good response here.
Up to 75% response rate almost.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give it a couple more seconds.
Yeah, we'll give it a few more seconds here.
Callers.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and end this poll? I'll go ahead and end it and share the results to everybody. Any surprises there that you see, Kenny?
The only one I see is planned features going into this product strategy.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of people want to put features in their product strategy.
Yep.
Not sure I'm a fan of that.
That is, and in some way, this was a bit of a what I want to say loaded question here, because I actually put some elements in here that really aren't product strategy, but yet as we can see, and especially around the planned features, those are things that we would not typically consider as part of the product strategy. Product schedule and budget also wouldn't really necessarily be part of the product strategy. Product vision is clearly something that you want to make sure is in your product strategy. OKRs are an element, or KPIs are an element that we want to include in our product strategy. But here's what I really want to emphasize is that those in and of themselves are not a product strategy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so let's talk about what strategy is and isn't. So these are some things that a product strategy isn't, which really falls back to what we just showed you on there. So it's not a list of features that you plan to implement. It isn't your project plan. And Kenny and I have been around this long enough that we see many people present a roadmap, which is really just a project plan in disguise. And we call it a roadmap. And, we're not going to talk specifically about roadmaps today. I think in one of our upcoming ones that will come up, but we'll definitely talk to you about what a more strategic type roadmap looks like. As I said, with OKRs and KPIs, those are not necessarily a bad thing to have. And they are an element that you want to have come out as part of your product strategy. But what I see too often is we list those, goals of some kind and say, here's our strategy. Well, that's not a strategy. Those are just the goals or the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And then finally, I don't know about Kenny. I don't remember if you did an MBA or not, but I did an MBA. And one of the things that we often got caught into, within our classes is we started throwing out a bunch of buzzwords as if, that sounded like we knew what we were talking about. And I had one professor who's like, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old or, a 5th grader or whatever, because that's, when we start throwing out buzzwords, that really isn't a strategy. It sounds great, but it isn't really anything that we can take action on or be executable.
I played buzzword bingo. Have you, Tom?
Yeah, exactly.
Deep discussions.
Yep, exactly. And I think we often end up around that. And so I went out and I did just a quick survey around different definitions of strategy. And as you look at these, I'm not saying they're inconsistent with each other, but they do tend to focus on some different aspects of strategy. And so you see here, a mix of policy and action. Okay. Michael Porter's, that's one that I've definitely used a lot, is that unique and valuable position. I love Peter Drucker. It's like a sense of direction. And I think the point that he was trying to make there is that it's kind of, here's where we want to go. Here's how we think we're going to get there. But we also recognize that we can't have a perfect plan in place. And so it's really given us that direction. Many of you have heard the Sun Tzu one, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. I love Steve Jobs in terms of, his emphasis on keeping focus. So is figuring out what you're not going to do. And then of course there's,
I love that one, Tom, too. Tom, I love that one too.
Yeah.
I love that. The key of a good strategy, of all the millions of things that you might want to do to move your business forward, if you've got a good strategy, it filters out all those things that you should not be doing.
Yeah,
What businesses you shouldn't
exactly.
be in, what activities you shouldn't be engaging in, right? Make sure you're doing things that make your beer taste good.
Mhm. All right. So what I decided to do is why don't we go and really kind of bring this together into a common definition of strategy. And so, I use that idea. It's a coherent and integrated decisions. And so the key here is that you are going to make multiple decisions that individually, that decision doesn't make the full strategy, but yet when you bring them all together, that starts to make an integrated and coherent strategy. One of the things that I've read a lot about is where companies may look at one of their competitors and say, "Oh, this is part of their strategy. This is what they do really well. Let's imitate what they are doing." But that's only one element of their strategy. there are, many other things that they are doing that makes it part of their strategy. So that's part of that. And then the important aspect is the trade-offs, is that we can't do everything. We have to have some clear focus to it. And so what is that winning aspiration? What is the outcome ultimately that we want to achieve? You can probably relate that into the vision statement of here's where we want to be. Here's how we want to be seen. Here is the difference that we want to make in the world. One of the books that I really love, and this is what all connects back to that, is this book, Playing to Win by A.G. Lafley and Roger Martin. And if you don't know A.G. Lafley or who he is, who he was a CEO of Procter and Gamble for a period of time, and actually, I guess 2 periods of time, and really had a great impact on the organization. And one of the things they talk about in the book that really sticks in my mind is making those decisions about where are we going to play. All right. Because there's a large playing field out there that we could play, or there's a number of playing fields, actually, I guess we could play on, but we can't play in them all. We have to decide which ones do we want to play in. And then once we decide where we're going to play, is how are we going to win? So what is our strategy that's going to help us win? Now, as we add in here, to be able to achieve a strategy, there's certain core capabilities that you have in place. Or perhaps as a product manager, you have to assess what core capabilities are available to you in terms of helping you determine which strategy might be feasible for you. And the last part around management systems is being able to track how you are performing, executing against that strategy. And so that's where your OKRs or your goals or your objectives, KPIs will all come into play, because those are the measurements that tell you and let you understand how well you are doing in that strategy. But foundational to all of this isn't stuff you just make up. There has to be a context that helps inform you to build out that strategy. And so we're going to talk about those elements there just to help us make sure that we are starting with a good, strong context. Well, let's talk about strategy theater. So what is strategy theater? It's the performance of looking strategic without actually being strategic. And so that goes back to really some of the things Kenny and I were saying at the very beginning, is we often use lots of words. We throw up charts, we throw up, frameworks, etc. And they all look like we know what we're talking about. But in reality, they aren't really strategy. They aren't really, focused choices that we're making. We don't have the context behind it. And so while it looks great, in the end, is it something that you can align your teams around? Is it something that you can actually execute on? And will it help you win in the marketplace? Kenny, you have any good examples of strategy theater that you've seen in the past?
I've seen it tons of times. When a group gets up, and that's where we get to play buzzword bingo and just throws lofty goals and objectives and ideas without a plan or a methodology for how to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. There was one client that I worked with, and this has probably been 8 or 10 years ago. And as I started to do some research on them, and I think it was looking at their one of their financial reports, their 10K, I was reading in there, and it said, our strategy is to, grow in breadth, depth, and, something else there. And as I'm going like that, I thought, interesting. But it sounds like you're trying to do everything. And so it wasn't clear to me where they were saying no to. And as I started working with the organization in more detail, and this is an organization that had, at least 100 product managers or so, that I started to realize that it was kind of, yes, we'll do anything. And
Yeah,
I understand
emblematic
kind of why they were wanted to do that, but it was also wasn't giving them really good direction.
Yeah, emblematic of those companies that perform strategy theater is they tend to have a lot of projects that no one knows why they're doing them,
Yep. Uh-huh.
right?
Yep. And one great example around this is that there are all of the product managers would every year during the strategic planning cycle would propose these projects. And then there would be that negotiation period. And some of you may relate to this of where they kept coming back and saying, well, what if we didn't give you, $2 million, but we only gave you $1 million for this? What could you do? Because what they were trying to do is instead of focusing is make sure they did a little bit of everything. And
Yeah,
so I go like,
trim around the edges rather than do the deep cuts.
yeah, exactly. So another example there, that in a way is probably a strategy theater. So here's some examples around it. Using great phrases like "we're going to delight customers through innovation." Well, what does that really mean to me? And this is one of the things as I've spoken and taught product managers in classes. I will, talk about as a product manager, you need to make sure that your product strategy is aligned to your overall organizational strategy. And they will say to me, we don't know what our organizational strategy really is, or it's so broad that there's not really guidance in there in terms of helping them make better decisions. We talked about the roadmap. And I would say, earlier in my career, I was guilty of that also, where I would build out a roadmap and think that I had a strategy, but it really wasn't. It's just a bunch of features that we're going to deliver on a, particular date, but it doesn't necessarily demonstrate what the strategy is behind why we are selecting those features. Using great words, AI first, a platform, etc. Again, those things don't necessarily guide you because you're not demonstrating any decisions or specific trade-offs that you're making. You're not connecting it back into that core challenge. Shifting strategies regularly. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I had a client that said, we want you to do a roadmap workshop. And they said, one of the things we want you to be able to answer is, how often should you update your roadmap? And I went out and did some research, and I found one of the roadmap tool vendors had done this research, and it asked him, how often are you updating your roadmap? And it was well over 50%, and it might have even been, 70 or 80% said we update our roadmap weekly or daily. And I'm going, then that's not a roadmap. That's not a strategy. That's just a list of features. That's a management of your backlog that is going on there, and not really a roadmap. And so, pivoting, or Kenny, I'm sure you've run into this where, senior leaders hear a new thing going on in the marketplace, and the next thing they're coming in and saying, this is our focus area that we have to focus on. Oh, a month from now, here's another area. This is the most important thing that we should focus on. I had one CEO in a meeting say to me, here's the most important thing that you need to focus on, Tom. And I worked on it for, a month or so. And all of a sudden it was like, all right, moving on to something else. And I was like, okay, maybe that wasn't so important.
Yeah, I was working with an e-commerce company about 5 or 10 years ago, and the CEO suddenly went to some presentation on Bitcoin, and he was like, "Tomorrow or by the end of the month, we need to be able to have payments in Bitcoin."
Yeah.
And they hadn't even implemented direct debit from your bank account at that point, but they wanted to get Bitcoin in there.
Uh-huh. All right, Garth, I love that. Airline magazine management. what did we learn on our latest flight? Excellent.
Good job, Garth.
The last one is frameworks. And so I'll go back to my MBA experience where we use SWOT analysis, we use Porter's five forces, we use, Pestel analysis. I think the one that we abused the most was SWOT, where it was just like, as a part of our presentation, it was required to put a SWOT analysis in here. But never did we say, how did that connect into the decisions that we were making? And I think we often do that. Hey, we did the analysis, but where is that connection between what you learned from that and the choices that you made? Where is that true, real strategic insight? So how do we make sure we avoid strategy theater? So the starting point is doing a good diagnosis. And I think if you look at the different references I made to Philip Kotler and Richard Romelt, etc., I think you will, and you read any of their books, you will, Michael Porter too, all of them, I think, will talk clearly about the importance of doing that diagnostic up front. Really understand what is the challenge that you're facing. What is the challenge you're facing in the market? What are you trying to overcome? What is the problem that you're trying to solve for your customer? And then start to make real trade-offs. Because as you've already heard us talk about, too many organizations get caught in, we want to do everything. I worked for a company in Brazil. It's been many years ago. And one of the things that I saw, not just with this company, but many of the companies, is that Brazil was going through a great transformation at the time in terms of recovering from their inflation. There was so much opportunity that I would see companies try to pick up all of these different opportunities and do them all. And they had a really hard time selecting and focusing on a particular area. But yet, here I am 30 years later, and I see companies run into that same problem over and over again. Make sure we're specific. Now, it's easy to talk in generalities, but make sure that we are specific in terms of what we are talking about, in terms of the decisions that we are making. And I think if you follow all of these different rules, you're going to find that it's going to be a lot easier to align other stakeholders in the organization. It's going to make sure that everyone has an understanding of your strategy and that they're going to all be walking together with you on that strategy. So what is a good product strategy? Well, let's first talk about the strategic process. And it all starts with that diagnosis. It all starts with having the market and organizational context. So understand what is going on in the market and what are the goals and objectives and strategies of your own organization. And then from there, we build out our product strategy, answering those questions of where are we going to play? How are we going to win? What does winning look like for us? Then as we're executing on that product strategy, we need to have those measurements in place. We need to have clearly defined outcomes, tracking how we are doing against those outcomes, and then using that to re-inform us around what's happening out there in the marketplace, and using that to make some changes or adjustments in the strategy if we feel like that is necessary. Or it may be we just need to change some of the things around execution without necessarily changing the overall strategy. So all of these things here are what shapes that strategy. Knowing the goals of our organization, understanding our objectives, knowing what our internal resources are like, what are the values of the organization, making sure that we align decisions around things that align to who we are as an organization. Understanding the different market environment. We're going to show you some tools here later on that can help you as far as identifying that context around strategy. And then once you start building that strategy, what are some of those key decisions that you need to make? And so I've taken this and I've built this out into a little more focused, what I want to say, definition for, around a product strategy. So product strategy is the set of integrated choices that define how a product will create differentiated value. So it has to be different to a specific set of users in a given context. But within all of this is it supports the goals of our organization. And so what will we typically want to see in a product strategy? What is the product vision? Okay, where do we want to be? How do we want to change the world? How do we want to impact our customers? That's really what we're talking about when we're thinking about that product vision. Who are the target segments that we're going to serve, or who are the target users? So, this gets down into we can't be everything to everyone. We have to make some decisions around who those target users or segments are going to be, or target markets. What is our core value proposition, and how are we going to differentiate? That helps us answer that question around how are we going to win? Now, as I said, is a list of product features is not a strategy, but I do think it's fair to say within a strategy, we can talk about the high-level capabilities that we need to be able to deliver on that is going to help us meet the needs of our target customer and to be able to differentiate us in the marketplace. Then we have those success metrics, whether you want to express them as OKRs or, outcomes or whatever that may be. We want to be able to measure how are we performing against that strategy? Are we achieving the business results that we wanted to? Are we making the impact on our customers that we want to be able to make? What are those key bets that we're going to make? And so, it kind of relates back into those capabilities, though it could go beyond just capabilities, because some of those bets may be around your go-to-market. How are you going to take the product into the market? Some of your channel selection, your pricing model, all of those things could come back into those strategic bets. And then one of the things I think is really useful, and I'm going to say I probably haven't done this as much in the past as I should have, but is also being really explicit about decisions of what you are not going to do. Because guess what comes up during a conversation, Kenny, as you're presenting your strategy, if you don't have what you're not going to do?
Usually there'll be an idea of something else you might want to try.
Exactly.
Why are we doing X?
So I'll give an example of this, is that one of the products I managed early in my career was in the area of document management. And we had a specific focus in terms of especially companies that had been ISO 9000 certified, or had some kind of model in place of where they had to have tight control and version control over their documents and make sure that they were properly approved. And so we had a really tight focus in that area. And I had one of the senior leaders in the organization who said, look, all of these banks are spending money and insurance companies are spending money on document management, which means all this paperwork is coming in, they're scanning it, and then they're putting it into a document management system. We should be able to do that, right? And I was like, well, could we potentially, but is that our target market segment? No, that's not the core value proposition that we are delivering. And even if we did think we could deliver on that, we're competing against companies who have specifically targeted that market. And so our chances of ever winning in that marketplace are really slim. So that's where, ultimately we made it clearly stated that this is something we intentionally are not going to do because it wasn't part of our strategy. So, how do we test our strategy? Well, don't test it on your own. Test it by having conversations. And that may be with your manager. And I would say ideally it ought to be with your manager, but you can test it with other product managers in your organization and answering these questions. So, how does it fit with the environment? So, if we've done that analysis, we understand the context up front, we've done that diagnosis, we ought to be able to go and connect and clearly identify how our strategy supports us within that environment. How does it exploit key resources, and especially those resources that are in your organization? Because you want to be careful about saying we need lots of other resources that we don't currently have, or things that we as an organization have not started to invest in. Now, everything I say here, you can probably find some exceptions, but there definitely can be opportunities where you say to your management team, this is so important. This is a great place for us to play. It's time for us to start investing in building these resources so that we can play in that area. So don't say that just because you don't have the resources, I'm not going to ignore it, or I'm going to ignore it, but be willing to ask those questions. Will we be able to sustain an advantage? Now, I know when I did my MBA, we often talked about sustainable competitive advantages. And I'm here to say, I don't believe you can ever sustain an advantage ever, but you can definitely sustain it for a period of time. And one of the great examples on that is Dell. So the Dell model that they had in the late 1990s, maybe into the early 2000s, clearly gave them an advantage. But eventually their competitors caught up with them. And part of their struggles then after that was, how do we adapt? How do we create a new advantage that we are going to play within? Do you have the resources to pursue that? Boy, that's the one that I think so many organizations, let's see, they are not willing to ask that question. Yeah, well, let's do that. Or let's do that too. Let's do that too. And nobody is willing to say, we don't have the resources to be able to do that. And I'm happy to say, at least within our company Productside, we are willing to say that, because I've even myself have proposed things we ought to, that I think there's an opportunity for, but it came down to, we don't have the resources right now to do that. And that was the right decision to make. And so, that was one of the things that I've always said to product managers, don't take it personal if someone says, no, we're not going to approve your business case, because it's not about you. It's about, is that the right decision for the organization right now? And of course, that last one is, can you actually execute on this? Can we actually implement that strategy? And I think as you're having those conversations, your product leader or another product manager is going to challenge you around, those questions. Well, before we go into the next part where we're going to share some of the resources, let's do another poll here. And in this one, you can put in one response. Now, I know some of these may be things, yes, I want to do one more than these, but choose the one that you believe is probably the most important for you to be able to better focus on. And so what can you do to improve creating your product strategy? And so deeper understanding of that context, do a better job of defining target markets and personas, prioritizing customer problems or customer needs, having a clear and focused positioning, clear success metrics to help us measure how we're progressing forward. And that last one, saying no more often. So we're let's see, we're about 50% participation here.
About
so
halfway,
let's wait here about
give it a couple
another
more seconds.
5 or 10 seconds as they work on that. All right. Let's give it about another 2 seconds here. So 2, 1. Let's go ahead and close that poll, and we're going to share the results with you. So, wow.
A little bit all over the place. That's good.
Yeah, there's not like a straightforward theme here, though the ones that definitely stand out the most is the clear success metrics and saying no more often. So, I would say if I had one, and this is something that we see in common, I would probably prioritize saying that no more often. But I'm not saying that's the right thing for your context, but definitely that is an important one to use. And then having clear target markets and personas. That's another one that I think really stands out to me as something we don't often do as well as we should. Any other thoughts there from you, Kenny?
Yeah, I helped save a company, I think, by saying no. I was working for a company that was into business to business selling. It was really good at selling to, large multinational corporations. We created something that got initial buzz with consumers, and the CEO and the board of directors said, "Let's go whole hog on this consumer opportunity because it looks like a huge, huge business for us." Thank God we didn't. It would have crippled us, right? Because we had no clue on how to support millions of users. We knew how to support tens of users. We're really good at that. So fortunately, we didn't go in that direction. It would have been ugly.
I'll share I'll share a little bit of a story around this. Is that back in so this is a long time ago. And I mentioned that I had worked, I think I mentioned I worked in Brazil, but I actually was working with a Brazilian company in Brazil. And they were involved in bidding on this big project that the state government, one of the state governments in Brazil was working on. And one of the things they were looking for was a partner to be able to share, to be able to be a partner in providing the computers. Well, they came to Austin. That was before I actually joined them. And we sat in a meeting with executives at Dell. And we talked about how this was a big opportunity, talking multi-million dollars of computers there. And we would love for them to be our partner. Well, at that time, Dell did not have a presence in Brazil. And they said, "We're sorry, but no, because we once entered Brazil without having a good strategy in place. And it ended up damaging our reputation at that time because we had a partner there, but we didn't really have a vested strategy in place. And so, no, even though that's, you're talking millions of dollars of computers, that's not something that we want to invest in at the moment." Now, about 3 years later, they did make the decision to invest in Brazil and establish their own manufacturing and everything. But it was definitely a great example of where they knew that they were not in the right position to support it right now. And they weren't motivated by, yes, there are some millions of dollars of opportunities there. Well, let's show a couple examples, and I'm going to go through these quickly because we're running up here with just a little bit of time. But what we wanted to do here is just show some examples. I'm not going to walk through these in detail, but as you look at these, you can start to see some of the things that we've been talking about. So like Figma, I don't know how many of you are users of Figma or familiar with it, but you can see there, especially around that decision of where to play. They are not trying to be all things to all people, but you notice there are a really strong focus on digital product teams. We're not a general design tool. We have a specific area that we want to focus on and be able to solve that problem. Some of the things they felt they needed to do to be able to make it, most successful. Some of the trade-offs that they put in. And I think, if we look at some of those trade-offs, a lot of that comes back into not trying to be a general purpose design type tool, but be able to focus on a specific need and a specific problem in the marketplace. Another one
And for those
here.
of you, who like Figma, you probably could make a lot of money off it yesterday if you invested. They went IPO yesterday, opened at 25 and closed at 38, so about
Oh my
50%
goodness.
increase.
Yeah.
So yeah, Figma did okay.
Yeah. Figma did okay. Well, here's another one is the Swiffer Wet Jet. And I don't know about you, but when the Swiffer came out, I became a fan of it. Now, can you clean floors without using Swiffer? Exactly. You can use a mop and a bucket and spend multiple times, but it becomes fairly messy to manage and clean up after the fact. And not everybody has the desire or the time to do that. And so you can see there they had a really well targeted market in terms of busy households, not time to do a lot of cleaning. Now, yes, there was, maybe a little bit, let's see, stereotyping here, but it was, targeted for, a lot toward the women who, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at that, make that decision around the cleaning, etc. But one of the things they did not want to do is to try to do any low end pricing. So they weren't trying to target everybody. They were trying to target a market who appreciated the value add that this brought into their life, helped them to be able to get a job done better than what they currently were able to do that. And so, very successful product. They've extended it, in somewhere areas, but overall, it still falls into and aligns to that specific. Here's the target market. Here's the key value proposition that we want to deliver on. Well, let's share some tools here that you can use. And as I'm going through these tools, I want to preface this. One of the things that we're going to deliver or make available to all the participants of these strategic planning webinars. So there's 3 of these that we are working on or that we're presenting is a set of templates and tools that you can use. So don't feel a need to go and try to copy these or screenshot them or anything like that, because we're going to put these together into a playbook or a packet of templates that you will be able to download and start to use in your organization. So the first couple are around that context. And one of those that I really love is the pastel analysis. And so this is where you look at different aspects of the environment, market environment that you're competing in. And it's a great way to guide you through identifying what are things that you should be looking at and considering as part of what is going on in the market environment. Another is a competitive analysis. And so identifying what aspects of my competitors do I want to understand. And you want to understand more than just comparing your product to their product to your product. You want to have a more holistic perspective of it. You want to use that to be able to derive their strategy and then be able to turn that into how does it help you guide and impact your product strategy. So more of that context that you're looking at. Framing the problem. So product management 101 is what problem are you solving for and who are you solving it for? So this is a part of that. A part of that is going to help you in terms of building out a focused strategy. Writing a positioning statement. So we talked about not trying to be all things to all people, but being really clear about who that target customer is for this product. What problem are we solving for them? What is the value proposition? And how are we differentiating ourselves from our competitors? The product outcome canvas. This is really more, think of this as more of a communication tool, because while it doesn't have all of the product strategy elements in here, it has some of those in here, but it is a way that helps make sure that you're being really specific around the opportunity that you're pursuing and using that as a way to communicate with other stakeholders in the organization. And then there's the outcome-based roadmap. So we talked about earlier where a roadmap is not just a list of features in your backlog that you prioritize and you have a schedule in place of how you're going to deliver. We really want to focus on the strategy. How are we going to support the goals of the organization? What is the key value that we're going to deliver to our target customers? And those are all the things that you're going to want to work on before you actually even start thinking about the release plan. And then the last one is the go-to-market enablement. This here is capturing some key points of that strategy. So who are our target audiences? How are we positioning ourselves? Which, if you remember, includes that value proposition as well as the your differentiation. What are the key messages that we want to communicate, and what are the goals that we want to achieve? And so having some very specific outcomes or goals for our launch, or really any go-to-market activity that you're working on, is having that specifically in place. And all of these will help you better think through your strategy, but also be able to communicate and align with other stakeholders in the organization. So, Kenny, I think we're done there with this part of the webinar. I think we have a few slides that we want to cover, and then
Couple of
we'll get into
reminders
the Q&A
for
period.
folks that enjoyed the webinar today for opportunities to enhance and further some of your learning. Productside is coming to London for those who are in the continent, as they say. So either in England or beyond. In September, we'll be making an in-person visit to London as a chance to basically sign up for our 3-day training process in London. Click on this QR code and get a quick link to the ability to sign up for that class. Please feel free to join us.
Yep. And just so to let you know, I will be teaching that one. So I'm excited about
you
that.
get to see him again.
I know. Yeah. And it's been a while since I've been to London. So I'm ready to get back to London. So definitely join us if you can.
And as Tom mentioned, this is actually the first of a set of 3 webinars for a series that we call Strategic Planning, right around that strategic planning season, end of summer kind of thing, for those in the Northern Hemisphere. And so we've got another webinar coming up in the coming weeks that you'll want to try to join to get the whole pack. And as Tom mentioned, at the end of all these webinars, we'll actually be handing out a specific playbook around strategic planning that has some of the tools that Tom mentioned in today's webinar, but also we'll be introducing some additional tools in the webinars in August. So to talk about those webinars in August, click on it. Next slide.
Yep.
Here we go. Those 2 webinars. There's one the week of August 13th. If you like my delivery, then I'm actually leading part 2 of our session, where we'll actually talk about how you connect specific outcomes that you want to have as a business to those outcomes that you want to choose for your product, right? So how do you connect those 2 together, staying away from, just talking about output? Output comes later, but what are the product and business outcomes we want to have? And then the following week on August 20th, one of our cohorts at Productside, Roger, will be delivering a webinar on August 20th on how you take some of the strategy you developed and effective ways to communicate that to both internal and potentially external stakeholders. So chances to further your learning in terms of product strategy and those kind of things. And also, if you are interested in other courses that we have and aren't going to be in London in September, we've got a whole bunch of both in-person and virtual courses that we'll be doing. There's one starting in late August on our full set optimal product management, with a live online version of that given by Dean Peters, our other co-worker or co-trainer on optimal product management. Roger, who's doing the strategy one, the communicating product strategy, will also do an optimal product management class live online and starting in early September. Tom will doing, after his London visit, will be doing a live online version of our AI product management class, a new course for product side that I think you'll find hugely valuable. And again, if you're going to be someplace in the world and want to do live training, if you're going to be in London in September, you can see Tom. If you're going to be in New York in October, you can work with Roger. And then if you're going to be in Austin in December, you can again see Tom, who's going to stay home this time and not have to travel in order to do his
but we have a great Austin is a great place for the training. London too, but
we've got a couple of minutes. If you've got questions that came up today, please feel free to ask those. I see a couple of ones. Another question for, are we going to get the recording? And the answer is yes. And another one on, do we have dates for the upcoming webinars in the series? I think I laid those out. So we've got those all set. And you also get a copy of the presentation so you can review those dates. Or even more importantly, come to productside.com to see when and where we're going to do additional webinars, or sign up for our newsletter and be informed about when we're going to do the webinars. So other questions that people may have, feel free to ask them, put them into the Q&A box. I've got one that was burning my mind as I was going along. Tom, are there different types of strategies in an organization, and what are some of those different types of strategy?
Yeah. So my answer to that question is yes, there are different types of strategies. Now, interestingly, if you look at some of the authors out there, and I can't remember which one said this, is like, there's only one strategy in an organization. That's the business strategy. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that is that is a key starting point for it, but it's, how the organization is overall going to win in the marketplace. But then you also start to see, depending upon the size of your organization, definitely there are product level strategies. So every single one of us as a product manager needs to have a strategy for the product that we're managing. But I also see where larger global companies are serving multiple segments, and those can be vertical markets or those could be regional markets. And in a case like that, you need to have a strategy for the different market segments. And so, as I like to think about it, there's the business strategy, there's the market segment strategies, there's the product strategies. And then as product managers, we need to make sure that we are supporting the market strategy and the business strategy. And at some points, we may actually want to influence those strategies, especially the market segment level strategies.
Excellent. All right, I got one more. We probably have time for one more question. And Annabelle, thank you for asking this one. How often have you seen companies go without strategy?
Way too often. And just being honest and serious here is that most of them have a general notion, but I see too many just doing exactly what we talked about earlier. Is they're doing strategy theater. They're throwing out generalities and buzzwords and things that sound good, but it really isn't clear. It's not the clear guidance and the clear yes and no decisions that we think make up a valid strategy. So there's not clear choices being made as part of those strategies.
And Tom, it highlights to me one other point I see around strategy. One of the analogies people do around strategy is that they're the oars that allow you to steer your canoe. Mm-hmm. Right? And how many folks would want to be in the middle of a lake with no oars? That's kind of what it is for being a company with no strategy. You sort of go wherever those winds and waves will take you.
Well, and but it also, if you think back to the phrase from, is it The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy, is it the Cheshire cat that she sees, and she goes, "Which way should I go?"
That's Alice.
Oh, Alice. Sorry, Alice in Wonderland. Sorry, thank you for correcting me. So Alice in Wonderland. I was mixing two together. So Alice in Wonderland, and she goes to the Cheshire cat. Which way should I go? And he says, "Well, where do you want to be?" "Well, I don't know." "Then it doesn't much matter which way you go." And that's exactly what strategy is about, is it's helping you make those decisions about, here's where we're going to go, and here's the way that we're going to get ourselves there.
All right, that seems like a good way to close things down. Yeah. For the Cheshire Cat, Alice in Wonderland, and even Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. So there's no place like home. But thank you all for your attendance. As we noted, everybody's going to get a copy of the slides and a copy of the recording. So feel free to share those with your poor coworkers that didn't have a chance to join us this morning with that. Thank you for joining. And as I said, there'll be a part 2 of our strategy webinar coming on August 13th and part 3 with Roger on August 20th. Don't forget to sign up, join, and continue our discussion around how to create great strategy in organizations.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very
Kenny.
much.
Great collaborating with you again.
Thanks.
Alrighty. Bye.